My name is Nora James. I'm 28 years old, and I live in Boston. If you asked me a year ago, I would have told you my life was ordinary, maybe even quiet. But grief has a way of shaking the ground you thought was solid. And when my father passed, I learned that family doesn't always mean safety. It can mean betrayal deep enough to make you fight for every brick of your own home. The sun hung low and warm over the cemetery, and the air smelled like cut grass and wet soil. My father's name looked too sharp on the new stone. I stood there with my phone in my hand and called my half-sister Tasha. I needed a soft voice, a ride, a cup of tea, anything to keep the quiet from swallowing me. "It's over," I said when she answered. "Can you drop by later?" "I don't want to be alone tonight." There was a long sigh, like I had asked for something huge. "We're having a party for Dad's promotion," she said, meaning her father, not mine. "You'll be fine." The line clicked dead. I stared at the screen as the ache in my chest spread to my throat. I turned back to the grave. The last little landslide of dirt had sounded so final. Wind brushed the flowers, and a ribbon lifted and fell. Footsteps crunched on the path. A man in a dark suit stopped a few paces away. His tie was plain, and his face looked careful. "Miss James?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm Daniel Ross," he said. "Your father's lawyer." "He asked me to give this to you, personally." He held out a sealed envelope with my name on it in my father's neat handwriting. My fingers shook as I took it. The paper felt heavier than it should. "What is it?" I asked. Daniel looked at the grave and then back at me. "Something he wanted you to have, privately." I slid a nail under the flap, but stopped. I could almost hear my father's voice. "If anything happens to me, you'll know what to do." I slipped the envelope into my purse. Daniel gave a small nod that said we would speak again. As he walked away, a thin chill ran down my arms even in the warm light. I whispered, "I'll figure it out, Dad." A crow called from the far tree, sharp and lonely. I stepped back from the grave and turned toward the gate, already feeling the echo of the house, without him, and the echo of a sister who had just told me I would be fine when I was not. The cab ride to my father's townhouse felt longer than the flight. The driver kept quiet, which I appreciated. The city slid past in slow frames. A woman pushing a stroller, a boy tossing a ball, a man hosing down his steps. Life kept moving, even when mine had paused. When we stopped, the front gate was chained and locked. No porch light, no warm glow through the curtains. The house looked like it had closed itself up while I was gone. I paid the driver and hauled my suitcase to the gate. I kept a spare key in my wallet. The lock turned, but the chain did not move. Someone had added a new padlock. My stomach tightened. I stepped back and studied the windows. The upstairs one in the study was cracked open a finger's width. He never left windows open. A shadow moved behind the lace. I called out, "Hello?" The street swallowed my voice. The neighbor from next door, an older woman with kind eyes and a garden hose, peered over the hedge. "Nora," she said softly, "they've been here while you were gone." I walked over. "Who?" She lowered her voice like the air had ears. "Your mother, your sister, and the man, my stepfather." I tasted metal in my mouth. "When? Yesterday? And this morning?" She looked down the street, and then back at me. They had boxes. I thanked her and went back to the gate. I set my suitcase down and climbed the low brick edge, then the rail, and dropped into the yard. The back door key still worked. Inside, The air smelled like dust and lemon cleaner. The carpet showed fresh tracks. A chair that used to face the window now faced the wall. I set my bag by the stairs and stood very still listening. The house did not answer. I walked to the study and flicked on the light. Drawers hung open like open mouths. Papers lay in piles on the floor. My father's pen holder was knocked over and empty. The quiet had a shape now. It looked like a pair of hands that had taken and taken. A cold line ran down my spine as I saw the wall safe behind the painting. The painting hung crooked. I pulled the painting aside and stared at the small safe set into the wall. My father had shown me the code when I turned 21. He made me open it 3 times until I could do it with my eyes closed. I typed the numbers. The handle turned, but when I pulled the door, the weight I expected was missing. Inside, the shelves were almost bare. A few paper clips, 1 old receipt, no folders, no seal packets, no property files. I gripped the edge of the safe until my knuckles turned white. I checked the drawer under the window, the file box in the closet, even the space under the rug where he kept spare stamps. Bits of paper, but no deeds. The desk drawers had been shuffled and put back badly, like someone in a hurry thought they were neat. I tried not to think of my mother's neat hands, or Tasha's quick ones, pulling papers and not caring how they left things. I sat in my father's chair and pressed my palms to my eyes. I had stood by his bed the night before he slipped away. He had squeezed my fingers and said, "It's all arranged, Nora. Trust what I signed." Now the proof was gone. I opened my phone and took photos of the safe, the drawers, the scattered papers. I texted Daniel, "House entered while I was away. Safe is empty. Please call me." A thud upstairs turned my head. I went still and listened. Then another sound, lighter, like a door slowly closing. "Hello?" I called. No answer. I took the stairs one at a time. My father's bedroom door stood ajar. The bedspread was straight, but the top drawer of his nightstand was pulled out. His glasses case lay on the floor, open and empty. In the guest room closet, a box that used to hold old tax files sat open and hollow. When I pulled the light string, a dead bulb blinked and stayed dark. I stood in the hallway and felt the house tilt. Not in the wood, but in me. My father had told me to trust what he signed. I would, but I would also learn where every missing page had gone. My phone buzzed in my hand. Daniel's voice was steady when I answered, but there was a tightness under it. "Nora, I'm sorry to bother you today, but we need to discuss the will." I walked back to the study and closed the door behind me. "Someone emptied the safe," I said. "Drawers, too." I waited for him to be surprised. He was not. "I was about to call you," he said. "Your mother and sister have already filed a notice to contest the will." My breath went short. "On what grounds?" He cleared his throat. "They're claiming you are mentally unfit to manage the estate." For a second, I thought I had misheard. "What?" "They submitted statements about stress, grief, and—" He paused. "Past anxiety, according to them." "I had one panic attack at 24 before an exam," I said. "That's it." "I know," he said. "And we can fight this. But there's more. When I went to pull the original will this morning, it wasn't in the file." I pressed my hand to the desk. "You lost it?" "No," he said. "It was in the safe file cabinet last week. Today it wasn't. There are signs someone opened the cabinet after hours. I have security footage. I've requested a copy." My heart pounded. "You think my mother took it?" He didn't answer that directly. "We need to move fast," he said. "I have certified copies, but the bank that handles one of your father, Accounts requires the wet ink original for certain authorizations. I'll file an affidavit and an emergency motion. I looked at the half-open safe. They were here, I said. The neighbors saw them. Document everything, he said. Photos, dates, times. Do not confront them alone. And Nora, stay calm. They want you rattled. My pulse steadied a little at his tone. What do I do right now? Change the locks. Call me if anyone shows up. I'll push the court for a quick date. We hung up. I slid the chair back and stood. Calm, document, move fast. I took a breath and reached for my father's old toolbox. I might be grieving, but I was not weak. A party for a man who was not my father could wait. My life could not. The house on Willow Lane glowed like a lantern when I pulled up that evening. Cars lined both sides of the street. Music drifted through the open windows. I could smell roast meat and spices from the sidewalk. I fixed my jacket, tucked my hair behind my ear, and walked up the path. I did not knock. The door opened on laughter, clinking glasses, and a room full of faces I knew from years of polite events. My mother stood near the dining table in a bright dress, holding a glass and smiling with small, tight lips. My stepfather stood beside her, red-cheeked, with a hand on her shoulder. Tasha leaned on the doorframe to the kitchen, shining in a silver top, her eyes already on me. The room hushed as I walked in. Nora, my mother said, her smile freezing. You should have called. I did, I said. You hung up. Someone coughed. My stepfather cleared his throat like he owned the air. This is not the time, he said. It is, I said. You were in Dad's house. While I was burying him, I saw the flicker in my mother's eyes. We're just protecting the estate, she said, putting her glass down. Things can get lost. They did, I said. From the safe, Tasha stepped forward, tilting her head like I was a small dog who had brought a dirty stick into the living room. Careful, Nora, she said softly. You'll regret pushing this. I took a breath. I want the original will back, I said. And the property files. My mother's laugh was light and empty. Sweetheart, that isn't how this works. My hands felt steady. It's how it will work now. A few people shifted, uncomfortable. My stepfather lifted his chin. You are unwell, he said to me. Grief has made you clear, I said. Grief has made me clear. I turned and walked out before the room could swallow me. Before my mother could say my name, like an apology she did not mean. On the porch, I drew a long breath of cool air. My phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. I have something your father wanted you to see. Behind the hydrangeas by the driveway, someone stepped into the shadow and waited. He was the last person I expected to see a day. My father's driver for 15 years. He looked smaller out of his uniform, but his eyes held the same steady light. He gave a quick nod and moved with me toward the side gate, away from the porch. I can't stay, he said, glancing at the house. But your father asked me to give you this, if things turned ugly. He pressed a small USB stick into my palm, wrapped in a folded receipt. He told me to keep it out of the office. I closed my fingers around it. What is it? You'll see, he said. I'm sorry for your loss. His voice softened. He was proud of you. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Thank you. AD slipped away down the dark path as someone laughed too loudly inside. I hurried to my car, locked the doors, and drove home with the stick like a hot coal in my pocket. At the townhouse, I plugged it into my laptop at the kitchen table. A single folder opened. Inside were scans of deeds. rent ledgers, bank slips, emails between my mother and my stepfather, and a draft of a listing agreement for a small commercial property on Maple Street. The date on the draft was the morning of the funeral. My breath caught. One video file sat at the bottom. I clicked it. My father sat at his desk, pale but sharp-eyed. "Nora," he said, looking straight into the camera. "If you're seeing this, you already know what they're trying to do. Trust the will. Trust what I left at the farmhouse. And trust yourself." He coughed and sipped water. "Change the locks. Keep records. See Daniel. And remember, do not argue in rooms they control." The video ended. I stared at the frozen frame of his face and let the tears blur the screen for a moment. Then I wiped my eyes and opened the Maple Street file. The email chain showed my mother asking a broker to rush paperwork before signatures become an issue. I checked the timestamp. She sent it an hour after I called her from the cemetery. I printed the whole folder and stacked the pages in order. When the printer stopped, the quiet in the kitchen felt different. Not empty this time. Ready. I set the USB stick back in the small envelope and wrote the date on it. Then I picked up my keys. There was one place my father had told me to go. Morning light turned the highway silver. As I drove out of the city toward the farmhouse my father loved, he used to call it his breath. When the city gets too loud, he would say, "I go there," and breathe. As the tires hummed, I tried to match my breath to their steady song. The road opened to fields and long fences. When I turned down the gravel lane, an old oak stood like a watchman at the curve. I could see the roof between its branches. The porch swing was still. The paint on the railing had started to flake, but a blue sedan sat in the driveway, and smoke curled from the chimney. My grip on the wheel tightened. I parked in the grass and walked up the path. A woman opened the door before I could knock. She wore a loose sweater and had flour on her hands. A child peeked from behind her leg. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm Nora," I said. "This is my property." She frowned. "We rent this house. We have a lease." "From whom?" "The owner," she said. My voice stayed calm. "What is his name?" A man stepped into the hallway behind her. He looked me up and down, then shrugged, like I was a flyer stuck under his wiper. "We pay the owner's agent," he said. "Every month. On time. Show me the lease," I said. The woman glanced at the man, then went to a drawer and pulled out a folder. The lease looked fresh, printed on thick paper, with a letterhead I knew too well. My stepfather's company. The signature at the bottom was his. I felt heat rise under my skin. I took a picture of every page. "You won't be thrown out today," I said to the woman. "I won't do that to you. But this lease is illegal. I'll be in touch." On the porch, I let the cold air cool my face. I walked around the side of the house to the small shed, and then to the back steps, where my father and I used to leave boots. A loose board in the porch floor clicked under my foot. I knelt and lifted it. Inside the hollow space, wrapped in brown paper, lay a letter with my name on it. I sat on the back step with the letter in my lap, the paper rough and warm from the sun. My father's handwriting filled the front in blue ink. I broke the seal with my thumb and unfolded the sheet. "Nora, if you are here, then you already know why. Trust only what's in the red envelope. Not blue, not white. Red. The rest is noise. In the attic is a trunk with a false bottom. Do not show it to anyone you do not trust with your life." I closed my eyes and let a wave of relief wash over me. "Please, let there be a red envelope." I stood and went inside through the kitchen door, passing the woman who was kneading dough at the counter. She looked at me with worry and kindness mixed together. "We didn't know," she said softly. "I know," I said. "It isn't your fault." I pulled down the attic ladder and climbed into the dry, warm space. Dust motes floated like tiny planets in a beam of light. The old cedar trunk sat under the far slope of the roof. I dragged it to the center, knelt, and opened it. Quilts lay on top. Below them, old photo albums and a stack of letters tied with string. I ran my hands along the bottom panel and felt a slight give, a thin seam. I pressed the two back corners at once. The board popped. In the hollow space I saw it, a flat, red envelope bound with a rubber band, and, beside it, a small metal tin. My hands shook as I lifted the red envelope. Inside were photocopies of bank forms, a key card, and a note, offshore account. "In your name. For emergencies only." The amount written under the note made my breath catch. $400,000. I sat back on my heels as the attic seemed to tilt. The key card had the bank's logo and a number. The metal tin held a USB flash drive and a spare SIM card. I put the red envelope and tin in my bag, pressed the false bottom back into place, and pulled the quilts over it. As I climbed down, I heard the low murmur of the tenants' voices and the sound of their child playing with blocks. At the kitchen table, I wrote my number on a sticky note and handed it to the woman. "You're safe for now," I said, "but if anyone shows up saying they own this place, call me and the police." On the porch, I looked out over the field and whispered, "I found it, Dad." The wind carried the words away like a promise delivered. Back in the car, I called the bank named on the key card. After 2 transfers and a long hold, a calm voice answered. I gave my name, the account number, and the code printed on the back. She verified my identity with questions only I would know. Then she said, "The account is active. Balance is $400,102. Relief and fear rose together in me like twin tides. "I need to access it," I said. "I can't give instructions over the phone," she said. "For this type of account, we require the original will to confirm beneficiary authority for related linked instructions. It's an extra layer of security your father requested." My throat tightened. "I don't have the original will. It's missing from my lawyer's file." "I'm sorry," she said. "We can schedule an appointment. But funds cannot move without the original, or a court order." When we hung up, the quiet of the lane felt thick. I texted Daniel, "Bank confirms account, but they need the original will or a court order." He responded right away, "Understood. Working on emergency motion." I drove back to the city, my mind counting steps like a path I could not skip. Protect the farmhouse, freeze any false leases, get the will or the order, secure the account, and then figure out what else my mother thought belonged to her at home. I opened my laptop and backed up the red envelope documents to 3 places. I printed a fresh set and put them in a new folder labeled Farmhouse, red. Then I checked the camera over the front door. My father had installed it after someone had stolen mail once. I scrubbed through the footage from the week I had been away. A white SUV pulled up 2 days ago. My mother got out first, in a scarf and sunglasses. Like she was an actress no one must notice. Tasha followed, smiling at something on her phone. The timestamp said 10:13 a.m. They entered with a key. An hour later, they left with 2 file boxes. The next night, a man in a navy jacket used a key and went straight to the study safe. His face never turned toward the camera, but I recognized the way he moved his shoulders. My stepfather always walked like he was pushing through a crowd, even in an empty hall. I saved the clips and sent them to Daniel. My fingers no longer shook. I knew what had been taken. I also knew who had taken it. The only thing left was proof they could not ignore. Proof arrived from a place I did not expect. The neighbor's small camera over her garage. She let me into her kitchen, poured tea, and pushed her tablet across the table. "It records the driveway," she said. I delete most of it. But my grandson set it to keep a weak look. The video showed my mother and Tasha walking to my father's office door at the back with a small toolkit and a key. Later, their arms were full of folders. They tipped one box, and paper spilled onto the steps like a white waterfall. Tasha laughed and kicked at a page before scooping it up. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. We copied the files. I thanked my neighbor and hugged her before I left. On my way home, my phone buzzed. "Daniel, meet at my office at 4. Bring any footage." When I arrived, he had already printed forms for an emergency motion and a temporary restraining order to prevent any sale or transfer of estate assets. He watched the clips, jaw tight, and nodded. "This supports unlawful entry and interference with estate property," he said. "We'll file now." I signed where he pointed, my name growing bolder with each stroke. "There's more," I said, sliding the Maple Street emails across his desk. He read them and leaned back. "They tried to list it the morning of the funeral," he said. "Good. Judges hate this." "Good?" I asked. A small smile touched his mouth. "Good for us. Bad for them." He tapped his pen. "There's one more thing." I pulled our building hallway camera. "Your mother and Tasha were recorded leaving our suite after hours on the day the original will went missing." He turned the tablet to me. There they were in grainy black and white, walking fast with a flat envelope tucked under my mother's coat. My stomach clenched. "We'll get it back," he said. "But be ready for noise." "Noise?" "They'll call you unstable. They'll try to bait you." "Don't take it." I thought of Tasha's soft voice at the party. "You'll regret pushing this." I thought of my mother's laugh with nothing behind it. Then I thought of my father's video, "Do not argue in rooms they control." "I won't," I said. Daniel slid the motion across the desk. "Then let's make a room they don't." Daniel filed the motion that night. The next morning, I woke to 3 missed calls from my mother and 2 from Tasha. I ignored them and made coffee. The steam warmed my face, but the tight feeling in my chest didn't ease. At 9:12 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time it was the neighbor from 2 doors down. "You should see this," she said. "Come over." She showed me a USB stick from her porch camera. The angle wasn't perfect, but it caught the glow of the hallway light in Daniel's office building after hours. 2 figures slipped out the door. Even in the shadow, my mother's profile was clear. Tasha followed, carrying something flat and wrapped in a scarf. My mother's eyes darted toward the camera, then away. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth hurt. That was the will. There was no doubt. When I brought the video to Daniel, he leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "This isn't just theft," he said. "It's control. They want to run the estate, like you don't exist." His words sank deep. I thought of the empty safe, the chained gate, the tenants at the farmhouse. All of it tied together. "We'll present this to the judge," Daniel said. "But remember, they'll twist everything. They'll say you imagined it, that you're too fragile for this responsibility." I met his eyes. I'm not fragile. Good, he said, because the hearing will be loud. On the way home, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered. A deep voice said, "If you want them stopped, go public." The line went dead before I could ask who it was. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the USB stick from Ad and the videos from the neighbors. Daniel's words echoed, "Go public." The idea made my stomach flip. My family's face on the evening news, their names in headlines, their friends whispering. It would burn bridges forever. But what bridge was left? They'd already salted the ground. At 8 a.m., I called Daniel. "Let's do it," I said. By noon, a local reporter sat across from me in my living room, camera crew in tow. I told her about my father's will, the missing documents, the farmhouse lease, the Maple Street property. I showed her the videos. She asked how it felt to be accused of being mentally unfit by my own family. My voice wavered, but I said, "It feels like betrayal from people who were supposed to protect me." That evening, the story ran on the 6 o'clock news. Daughter fights to protect late father's estate. The footage of my mother and Tasha leaving Daniel's office played in slow motion. Viewers saw my father's video message too. Within an hour, my phone lit up with texts from friends and strangers offering support. At 8:15 p.m., Tasha called, her voice sharp with anger. "You've embarrassed us," she hissed. "This isn't over." I hung up without a word. By the next morning, my story was on 3 more local stations and online. In the comments section, people shared their own stories of contested wills and family greed. Some called me brave. Others said I was airing dirty laundry. I didn't care. At 11:30 a.m., I got an email from someone calling themselves the archivist. The subject line read, "I know what they're hiding." The message was short. "Meet me tomorrow at noon. Your father's old fishing cabin. Come alone." My fingers hovered over the keys. It could be a trap, but the name pulled at me. My father had loved that cabin. He said it was the only place where he could think. I forwarded the email to Daniel with the time and place, then packed a small bag with a flashlight, gloves, and my phone charger. That night, I hardly slept. I kept seeing my father's face in the video, his eyes steady, his voice saying, "Trust yourself." The next day, the road to the fishing cabin was muddy and narrow. Trees leaned over the path, their bare branches rattling in the wind. When I parked, the cabin sat just as I remembered. Small, weathered, with green shutters. A man in a baseball cap stood by the steps. He lifted his head as I approached. "You're Nora?" he asked. I nodded. "I used to do your father's bookkeeping," he said. They called me the archivist as a joke. He reached into a canvas bag and pulled out a thick envelope. "These are copies of ledgers your stepfather didn't want seen. Years of rental income from the estate properties, diverted into his own accounts." I took the envelope and flipped through the pages. Columns of numbers, deposits, and withdrawals, each line a small theft. "Why give this to me?" I asked. "Because he's not the only one who knows how to keep records," the man said. "And because your father deserved better." I thanked him, tucked the envelope into my bag, and promised to keep his name out of it. As I turned to leave, he called after me, "Check the trunk inside." He told me it was important. The trunk sat against the far wall of the cabin, covered by an old quilt. I pulled it into the light and opened the lid. Inside were tools, a few fishing reels, and a wooden box. The box had a false bottom. I lifted it, and there they were, My father's business ledgers in his own hand, page after page, neat and precise. At the back, a letter addressed to me. I opened it. Nora, it read, if you found this, then you know the truth. Protect the estate. Do not let them take what I built. These ledgers prove the theft. Use them. My hands trembled as I put everything back into the trunk. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the shutters like warning fingers. I locked the cabin door behind me, the key cold in my palm. Back in the car, I called Daniel and told him what I'd found. He was silent for a long moment, then said, "Bring it all. We're going to court." By the time I reached Daniel's office with the ledgers, the sky had gone gray, and a light rain fell against the windows. We spread the documents across his desk. His eyes lit up as he read the entries. "This is clear proof," he said, tapping the columns. "Your stepfather diverted rental income from estate properties into accounts he controls." He pulled out a fresh legal pad. "We'll file an injunction to freeze all family assets until the court sorts this out." My chest felt both lighter and heavier. Lighter, because we had evidence. Heavier, because I knew what would happen next. "Will that stop them from selling more properties?" I asked. "It will stop them from touching anything tied to your father's name," Daniel said, "and it will send a message." We worked for 2 hours, organizing files, printing copies, and preparing exhibits. By the time I left, the rain had stopped, but the air was sharp with cold. When I got to the farmhouse that evening to check on it, I noticed the side gate was open. My pulse quickened. The tenant's car was gone, but the porch light was on. I climbed the steps slowly, my hand on my phone. Inside, muddy footprints crossed the kitchen floor. The living room smelled faintly of cigarette smoke. A lamp lay on its side. I stepped into the hallway and stopped dead. My father's photograph, the one I'd kept on the console table, was smashed on the floor. The glass was shattered, and a folded piece of paper had been slipped inside the frame. I pulled it out with trembling fingers. 3 words were scrawled across it in black marker. "Drop the case." I looked toward the front door, every hair on my arms rising. Someone had been here to send a message, and they wanted me to know they could walk in whenever they liked. I locked every door and window, then called the police. 17. The police arrived 20 minutes later. 2 officers walked through the farmhouse, taking photos and dusting for prints. One of them, a tall man with a calm voice, asked me to describe what was missing or damaged. "Just the photo," I said, showing him the note. He studied it, then placed it in an evidence bag. "The footprints are fresh," he said. "Probably within the last few hours." The other officer came back from the hallway, holding a small evidence card. "We've got a set of partial prints from the picture frame," she said. "We'll run them." I followed them to the porch, where they wrote up the report. My hands were cold, even though I wore gloves. The tall officer handed me a copy of the report and said, "If you think of anyone who might do this, let us know." "This looks like intimidation." I almost laughed at the understatement. "I can think of a few people," I said. When they left, I sat in my car with the engine running, staring at the farmhouse windows. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Court hearing moved up to next week. "Get some rest." I drove back to the city, every headlight in my rearview mirror making me tense. At home, I double-locked the door and left the lights on in every room. The next afternoon, the police called. "We matched the prints from the frame," the officer said. "They belong to your sister." I gripped the phone until my knuckles hurt. Tasha hadn't just been complicit. She'd been inside the farmhouse, sending threats. The officer asked if I wanted to press charges. "Not yet," I said, "but I'll make sure the court hears about it." 2 days later, there was a knock at my door. I checked the peephole. Tasha stood there alone, wearing a dark coat, her hair pulled back. I opened the door a crack. "What do you want?" She looked down at her hands. "I didn't mean for things to go this far." I raised an eyebrow. "You broke into the farmhouse." She shook her head. "I didn't break in. He gave me a key." "Your stepfather," I said flatly. She nodded. "He told me to leave the note. He said it would scare you into stopping before you ruined everything." I opened the door wider. "Ruined what?" "His grip on money that doesn't belong to him." She flinched. "You don't understand. Mom's scared too. If this goes public, his business will collapse. We'll lose everything." I felt my voice harden. "You mean you'll lose everything you took from me?" Her eyes filled with tears, but I could see the calculation behind them. "We can work this out," she said. "Just give us Maple Street. Keep the rest." I almost laughed. "You're bargaining with something that isn't yours." She stepped back, her face cooling. "You're going to regret this, Nora." I shut the door before she could say more. I leaned against it, my heart pounding. Her slip about the key was exactly what I needed. It tied my stepfather directly to the intimidation. I called Daniel and told him everything. Daniel met me at his office the next morning. "We're adding this to our evidence," he said, jotting notes. The fact that she admitted he gave her the key is huge. It's direct involvement. He leaned back in his chair. "There's something else." "We've recovered the original will." My breath caught. "Where?" "In a storage unit, rented in your mother's name," he said. "The police executed a warrant based on our motion. It was in a file box with your father's military papers." He slid the will across the desk. My father's signature was bold and clear at the bottom. I ran my fingers over the ink, feeling the weight of it. "There's a handwritten postscript," Daniel said. I turned to the last page. My father's familiar handwriting curved across the bottom. "If they fight you, give them nothing. Sell it all and start fresh." My throat tightened as I read it again. "He knew," I whispered. Daniel nodded. "The question is, what do you want to do with this?" I stared at the paper, my father's words burning into me. They were not just instructions. They were permission. I drove straight to the farmhouse that afternoon. Standing on the porch, I read the postscript again. "If they fight you, give them nothing. Sell it all and start fresh." My father had built his estate from nothing, and now his own family was trying to bleed it dry. I wouldn't just hold on to it. I would use it. Inside, I opened my laptop and began making a list. 2 contested properties were ready to sell: Maple Street and the small warehouse on River Road. They were valuable enough to make my mother and stepfather furious, and visible enough to attract attention when they went up for auction. I called Daniel. "Sell Maple Street and River Road," I said. "Public auction. Invite the press." There was a pause, then a slow chuckle. "You're sure?" "Very," I said. "If they wanted a fight, they'll get one." Over the next week, flyers went up, listings were posted, and the auction date was set. On the morning of the sale, reporters gathered outside the courthouse steps where the auction was held. I stood beside Daniel, watching my mother and stepfather arrive. My mother's face was pale under her makeup. My stepfather's jaw was tight. When the gavel came down and both properties sold above asking price, I didn't smile. I just met their eyes across the crowd. The message was clear. I wasn't going anywhere, and I wasn't giving them a single brick back. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps on auction day. Their cameras clicked like a flock of birds. Daniel stood to my left, calm as a stone. To my right, buyers waited with paddles and sharp eyes. My mother arrived first, wearing a careful smile that didn't reach her eyes. My stepfather followed, nodding at people he used to charm at fundraisers. I heard whispers move through the crowd as the reporter from the evening news pointed her mic our way. "Is it true the will was hidden?" she asked. "We'll speak in court," Daniel said. The auctioneer lifted his gavel. Bidding for Maple Street jumped fast. A hand from the back, another from the front, then two more. The numbers climbed higher than I had dared hope. When the gavel fell, a cheer rose from the buyers. I didn't cheer. I only looked across the crowd at my mother. Her lips pressed thin. My stepfather stared at the ground. Next came the River Road warehouse. Again the bids rose and rose, higher than the appraiser's best guess. When it sold, a circle of my stepfather's old business friends stood with their arms crossed. They didn't meet his eyes. He had invited them here to watch him win. They had come to watch the news. A reporter asked my mother if she had a comment. She tried to speak, but her voice failed. She turned away from the cameras and walked down the steps, heels tapping hard. My stepfather followed, face red, jaw working. Daniel leaned toward me. "This will sting them where they feel it most," he said. "In their pride." I nodded, but I also felt a new pull in my chest. This wasn't just a win. It was a door opening to the next fight. The court date was 3 days away. The auctioneer packed his papers. Buyers shook hands. I watched my mother's car pull into traffic and disappear. I didn't feel light. I felt steady, like a tree after a storm, still standing because the roots knew the ground. The courtroom was cold and bright. The judge watched us with a level gaze. No smile, no hint. My mother sat 2 rows back, hands folded tight. Tasha sat beside her, chin tucked, eyes on the table. My stepfather sat with their lawyer. Daniel set our files in a neat stack and spoke first. He told the story with facts only. The missing will, the late-night video from the office, the farmhouse lease with my stepfather's letterhead, the Maple Street emails, the ledgers from the cabin, the police report, and the note that said, "Drop the case with Tasha's prints." He laid each exhibit like a brick. When he finished, their lawyer stood and tried to throw dust in the air. He called me fragile and overwhelmed by grief. He said the videos were misunderstood, that the storage unit was a mix-up, that the farmhouse lease was temporary good faith. The judge raised a hand. "Enough," she said. She turned to us. "Ms. James, please stand." I did. "I find the will valid, properly executed, and controlling," she said. "I uphold your sole authority as executor and beneficiary." Her voice did not rise, but every word landed like a stamp. She turned to my mother and stepfather. "I find that you interfered with estate property and attempted to dispose of assets without authority. I order an accounting of all rents collected on estate properties for the last 3 years and repayment of those funds to Ms. James. I also order costs and fees." A murmur moved through the room. The judge looked at my stepfather. "Any further interference will result in sanctions." She banged the gavel. We won. Outside, the news hit fast. By evening, my stepfather's clients called their partners. The next morning, 2 key contracts pulled out. By the end of the week, a trade paper ran a short note facing legal action and loss of clients. Westbridge Holdings announced a pause in operations. My mother called me once and didn't leave a message. Tasha sent a blank text, and then nothing. I didn't call back. I took the certified copy of the order home and set it on the table. Then I finally slept through the night. In the quiet after court, I made a choice. I didn't want to sit on money like a dragon on a pile. I wanted it to move. I wanted it to help people who would never have anyone to speak for them. I met with Daniel and a nonprofit advisor. We formed the James Legacy Foundation. Our focus was simple and sharp. Small grants for law students who took on elder law and inheritance fraud cases. Emergency funds for families who needed to secure homes while a will was tied up. Free clinics once a month at the library. I put in the first seed money from the auctions and the rents the court returned. We built a clean website. We filed the papers. We opened a modest office above a bakery that smelled like cinnamon. I kept my father's photo on the desk in a new frame. We got our first letters within a week. A woman wrote that her uncle's house was being sold without consent. A student asked for help paying for a summer program in estate law. We said yes to both. The local paper did a piece. The headline read, "Daughter turns family, fight into help for others." I didn't love the headline, but I loved the callers it brought. That afternoon, an email slid into my inbox from Tasha. The subject line was bare. Inside, there were only 3 words: "I want to talk." I stared at the screen for a long time. I thought about the broken photo, the farmhouse note, the late-night files. I also thought about 2 girls at a kitchen table years ago, sharing a bowl of cereal and a joke only we would have found funny. I wrote back one line. "Tomorrow, noon, the cafe on Pine. Public place. Short." She replied, "I'll be there." I closed my laptop and looked at my father's photo. "We'll do this right," I whispered, "with clear lines, with light." I got to the cafe early and picked a small table by the window. People came and went in soft waves. Cups clinked. A child laughed. When Tasha walked in, she looked smaller than I remembered from the court steps. She wore a plain sweater, no rings, no sharp glitter. She sat and held her cup with both hands like she needed the heat. "Thank you for meeting me," she said. I nodded. "I won't stay long." She watched the steam lift off her drink. "I was wrong," she said. "I told myself I was helping Mom. I told myself you could handle it because you're always strong." But I knew what we were doing. I let the words sit. I didn't reach across the table. I didn't fill the silence. "He pushed me," she said, meaning our stepfather. "He made the plans. He told me you wouldn't fight. But I carried them out." She swallowed. "I left the note at the farmhouse." "I know," I said. She nodded, eyes bright. "I can't undo it. I can only tell the truth." I waited. "What do you want, Tasha?" She looked at me, and for a second, she was that girl at the kitchen table again. "I want to make it right," she said. "I can testify about the storage unit and the office. I can show you emails. I also want—" She stopped and took a breath. "I want a chance to be your sister again, not like before. Different. Honest." I felt the old ache and the new steel move through me at the same time. "I'm not ready for that," I said. "I'm open to your testimony. I'm open to hearing the truth. But I'm not letting you into my home or my day-to-day life right now." She nodded, wiped one eye with her sleeve, and didn't argue. "That's fair," she whispered. We finished our drinks in quiet. At the door, she said, "I am sorry, Nora." "I know," I said. Outside, the air was cool and clear. I walked away without looking back. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally cared for myself more than the mess behind me. Spring came soft and green. I spent the first warm Saturday at the farmhouse. The tenants had moved to a larger place across town, and I had finished the repairs. Fresh paint covered old scuffs. The porch swing creaked in a friendly way again. I planted young trees along the fence line and tucked herbs into the garden bed my father once called his doctor's cabinet. Inside, the room smelled like lemon oil and open windows. I hung my father's photo in the hallway in a sturdy frame with clear glass. I set a small bowl on the entry table for keys, the way he used to. In the afternoon, I brewed tea and walked the rooms with the quiet. It didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like a held note that didn't have to end. I thought about the path behind me, the grave, the call to Tasha, the envelope in the lawyer's hand, the chained gate, the empty safe, the long hours in Daniel's office, the fear when I found the note, the judge's voice, the clack of the auction gavel, the first donation to the foundation, the cafe meeting, and the way the air had felt lighter when I said no and meant it. I stepped onto the porch as the sun slid behind the oak. The field hummed with evening. A fox crossed the far fence line and vanished into the brush. I stood there for a long time, not thinking of battles or proofs or names. I thought of my father showing me how to check the fence, how to fix a hinge, how to breathe when the city got too loud. I went back inside and turned the key in the lock. The sound was small and sure. I wasn't closing the door on my past. I was closing it to keep out people who had never learned how to knock. I set the key in the bowl, turned off the lamp, and let the house hold me. Looking back now, I realized this wasn't just about protecting an inheritance. It was about protecting my voice, my dignity, and the truth of who my father raised me to be. Revenge didn't come through anger or destruction, but through clarity, patience, and holding on to what was mine without apology. And it leaves me wondering, how many of us have faced betrayal not from strangers, but from those closest to us? If you were in my shoes, would you have fought back the way I did? Or walked away to protect your peace? I'll be in the comment section